So I'm driving down the street with my 4-year-old nephew. I love watching the way his mind works. He asks a million questions. I say it's because the way the sun lights up the outer space is because engines make the wheels go. It's because their minds aren't quite like ours. I say yes, no, no, yes, no, yes, no. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe. We laugh. He smiles, looks out the window, spots a cop car, drops his seat and says, "Oh man, Uncle, 5-0, we gotta hide." I'll be honest, I'm not happy with the way we raise our black boys.
It's your Trayvon Martins, your Mike Browns, your Jesse Hernandez. It's the police reports you cannot stomach quietly. And once you've wrapped your mind around all the facts, all the beautiful humans that were beautiful simply because they were humans, and that were dead simply because they were deviant. And once you've gathered all the facts, debated whether guns should be used so eagerly and whether parents are truly to blame or if it was something bigger, and once you've sat there and realized that the problem had very little to do with tactics and virtually everything to do with race, it's then that you realize this needed to be addressed by the state. But it wasn't. And just as much as police forgot a criminal was still human, the state forgot that police were still human, and humans make mistakes. And they bow to systems, and fingers go to triggers when hands reach for pockets, and we find ourselves stranded in a system, locked out from anything that might be perceived as socially just. Our system is flawed. It can be argued that any of these names come with a grain of salt, that not all of these officers were wrong, that they didn't necessarily have the chance to represent themselves in court. However, these victims of the law didn't even get to represent themselves on the street. These killings were an unjust application of our system. If we attempted to break down our system, we could find that legal implications and systematic oppression are failing us far before an officer pulled a gun. Oscar Grant lost his life in an encounter with the police. In the criminal trial following the shooting of Oscar Grant, it was indicated that the trial was tricky, specifically considering the controversy of questioning the police's actions, and that it delegitimates the law when you question it. Potentially. But it also helps to sift through racially disposed protocol, racist subjectivity, and a race-based legal system. Preceding the death of Sean Bell, large settlements were allotted to the victim's family as well as the victim's friends also shot in the incident. However, this money was quickly brushed off by the public as a responsibility by taxpayers and an added benefit to attorneys, disregarding the root of the problem. As one surviving victim stated, "I don't think a black man or Hispanic man's life means much in New York City." Tamir Rice was a 12-year-old child, pointing a fake gun at people. It appeared to be only a toy, and even the caller who initially made the call to authorities indicated it was most likely a toy gun. Despite this, the moment the 12-year-old child on the swings reached for his pocket, the cops pulled the trigger. They're representative of a far greater issue, a culture that perpetuates broken policies, normalization of crime, and an automatic reaction that results in weapons drawn and shots fired. Though it is unknown just how many black males die at the hands of the police in justifiable homicides, in a recent Gallup survey, 24% of black males believe they had been treated unfairly in the past 30 days. Our country has responded shyly in public spheres, such as Prince's subtle Grammys reference, "Like books and Black Lives, albums still matter." However, the greater public has broken out in countless protests surrounding Ferguson, Black Lives Matter, and police brutality, greater concerns for all. The concern is not only the police playing a role in the system, but the established system's perpetuation of the racism we believe to be extinct. As Miners 2014 pointed out, Michael Brown was referred to as a Hulk and a monster. Even before human interaction, bodies, particularly bodies of color, have been marked as toxic, alien, and disposable. Toxic, alien, and disposable to the white privilege system, the white privilege culture. In this context, this foreign life appears less than human, and heavy discipline, violence executed towards them, and segregation de jure is certainly guaranteed.
beautiful black boys in this country cannot afford to play cops and robbers if we're always considered the latter. Don't have the luxuries of playing war if we're already in one.
Our society is flawed, but then again, so is our foundation. Our Constitution was written and soaked in racism. Civil rights activists and good humans have spent the last 200 years trying to wring it out. It's been a series of battles through policy change, petitions, and live tweets, though it is clear that slavery and racism has not fully dissipated, rather it has warped into a new set of tactics to maintain oppressive power for the white identity. Amendments cannot eradicate racism built into an institution. It can only change the way it looks and the name we give it. In her book, The New Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander stated, "What has changed since the collapse of Jim Crow has less to do with the basic structure of our society than with the language we use to justify it. In the era of color blindness, it is no longer socially permissible to use race explicitly as a justification for discrimination, exclusion, and social contempt. So we don't. Rather than rely on race, we use our criminal justice system to label people of color criminals and then engage in all the practices we supposedly left behind. Today, it is perfectly legal to discriminate against criminals in nearly all the ways that it was once legal to discriminate against African Americans. We'd be lying if we said there had been no advancement for people of color, however. The Reconstruction era became a time of rebuilding the reality of Black Americans through the abolishment of slavery, the 13th and 15th Amendment, advancements of the Freedmen's Bureau, the Civil Rights Act of 1866, and full citizenship finally granted for Black individuals. However, this period also saw the Black Codes, a way to hold freedom out of reach on a technicality. This was realized to be a fatal flaw and later eradicated, but when it was no longer appropriate to incriminate someone for their race, the next alternative became our criminal systems, with a greater amount of space allotted for people of color. We turned citizens into criminals the instant they breached white lines. People of color were accused of defying social contracts, and we proceeded to strip away guaranteed rights. It wasn't like we made it illegal to be Black. We just made it intentional who we pulled over on the highway. It just so conveniently overlaps heavily into the same group. This also marks the transition from legal interpersonal violence enacted on people of color to state violence enacted on people of color. Revel Siegel refers to this condition as preservation through transformation, a process through which white privilege is maintained despite alterations of the rules and rhetoric. Wars on drug and wars on crime served as a publicity stunt for those in office, and those incriminated had become mere casualties and inaccurate representations of populations who actually commit crime or engage in drug activity. Black Americans make up 13.2% of the U.S. population, but 37.5% of the prison population.
I take him by the hand, I say be strong. I tell him, I say be smart. Be kind and polite. Know your laws. Be aware of how quickly your hand moves to pocket for wallet or ID. Be more aware of how quickly an officer's hand moves to holster for gun. Be Black. Be a boy. Have fun, because this world will force you to become a man far more quickly than you'll ever have to need to. Uncle, what happens if the cop is really mean? And it scares me to know that he, like so many other Black boys, is getting ready for a war. I can't prepare him.